That night, I thought my brother was coming to my room for a simple talk. I barely had time to react. My brother stepped inside, locked the door behind him, and before I could speak, he pressed close and whispered words that made my whole body burn. After months apart, the tension between us exploded, and that night everything changed forever. It all started when I came back home after months away. It had only been a few months, but when I pulled into the driveway, it felt like I was visiting a memory instead of coming home. The house looked the same, chipped white paint curling near the corners, the old oak tree still leaning over the front lawn like a tired giant. But it felt smaller somehow, like the whole world had shrunk without me even. The air smelled different, carrying a sharpness. I didn't remember a faint edge of loneliness. I sat there behind the wheel. Longer than I meant to, gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary, trying to work up the nerve to walk inside the front door swung open before I could even reach for my bag. There, he was my brother standing in the doorway like he'd been waiting for me for a second. The sight of him stole every thought clean out of my head. He looked different, older somehow. Not just older, but bigger. Broader shoulders filling out the sleeves of a plain black t-shirt hair. Messier than I remembered, but in a way that looked intentional, like it belonged that way. His face had lost the boyish roundness it once had. There were sharp edges, now a stubble shadow along his jaw that made him look like he belonged somewhere I couldn't follow. And then he smiled wide and easy, and for a second I could pretend nothing had changed about Time Squirt. He called out, voice rougher, deeper than I remembered. I huffed out a laugh, forcing myself to move to bridge the space between us. Missed you too. Jerk! He stepped forward, and before I could think better of it, his arms wrapped around me in a hug. Tight, firm grounding. I froze for a second, startled by the strength of it, the way he lifted me slightly off the ground, like it was nothing. His chest was warm against mine, solid, in a way that felt alarmingly safe and dangerously unfamiliar. All at once, I found myself gripping the back of his shirt, clutching harder than I meant to. Maybe it was the time apart. Maybe it was just the shock of seeing him grown up. That's what I told myself later. He didn't let go right away. His hands lingered a little too long at my back, his fingers curling against the fabric of my jacket like he didn't want to pull away yet. When he finally set me back down, his hands trailed down my arms before falling away entirely, leaving a coldness in their absence that made me shiver despite the afternoon sun. You look different, he said, his eyes scanning me like he was cataloging every change. I laughed awkwardly, shoving my hands into my pockets. You're one to talk. What the hell have they been feeding you out here? You're huge. He smirked, flexing his arms in a way that made the fabric of his sleeves stretch tight. Hard work. Little bro got to keep the place standing somehow while you're off pretending to be a city boy. There was an easy, teasing tone to his voice, but underneath it something else simmered. Something that made my skin prickle. I grabbed my duffel bag from the trunk and slung it over my shoulder. He took it from me without asking, tossing it over his own with casual strength as we walked toward the house. He bumped his shoulder against mine, a familiar gesture. A playful thing we'd always done, but it didn't feel the same anymore. The contact was heavier, lingered a beat too long before he pulled away inside the house, smelled like old wood and laundry detergent, like memories soaked into every inch of it. I stood there for a second, letting the familiarity wash over me, but it didn't fit right anymore. Like a jacket I'd outgrown, but didn't have the heart to throw away. You hungry? Mom made her lasagna last night before heading out. He offered, tossing my bag onto the stairs leading up to my old room. Starving, I said, my stomach growling in agreement. As we moved into the kitchen, I caught him watching me again. Not in the casual brotherly way you watch someone you haven't seen in a while, but in a way that made my pulse stutter. His eyes didn't skim over me. They lingered, tracking every movement like he was memorizing me or maybe comparing me to something he remembered. And finding the new version unfamiliar, I busied myself with pulling plates from the cabinet, pretending not to notice. pretending my skin wasn't burning under the weight of his gaze, pretending I didn't feel like the air had gotten thicker between us, harder to breathe. He sat down at the table, leaning back in his chair, arms folded behind his head in a way that stretched his shirt tight across his chest. He looked casual, relaxed, but there was a sharpness to his eyes, a tension in his jaw that didn't match the lazy sprawl of his body. We talked while we ate about no. Watch me at first, I chalked it up to simple brotherly curiosity. After all, I had been gone for months. Maybe he was just seeing what had changed. Maybe he was trying to bridge the space that time had stretched between us. That was what I told myself when I caught him staring at me across the kitchen one morning. The toaster humming quietly between us. His eyes didn't dart away when I looked up. He held my gaze steady, unblinking until the toast popped up and broke whatever invisible line had tethered us together. And it wasn't just the staring, it was the touch too. Touches had always been part of our language growing up, roughhousing, shoving, arm punching. It had been easy, simple, thoughtless, but now his hand would linger a beat too long on my back. When he passed behind me, his fingers would graze my wrist when handing me a glass, and instead of letting go immediately, they would pause warm and firm against my skin before slipping away like he was forcing himself to move. The worst part was that I felt it every single time. The heat of him stayed long after he let go, sinking into my skin like a brand, marking me in places no one could see. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it was just nerves, just adjusting to being home again. But the excuses started to crumble fast. We wrestled in the backyard one afternoon like old times. It was supposed to be fun, a stupid way to burn off boredom. He tackled me easily, pinning me to the grass, laughing as I struggled underneath him. But when I stopped fighting, expecting him to let me up, he didn't. He stayed there, his body pressing mine into the earth. His hands circling my wrists again the same way he had that first night. His laughter faded into silence, and when I twisted my head to look at him, I found him already watching me. His face unreadable, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. He let me go after a moment, pushing off with a grunt and tossing me my cap. Like nothing had happened, but I lay there longer than I should have, staring up at the sky, feeling like the ground beneath me wasn't as solid as it used to be. That night we ended up on the couch, a movie playing in the background. Neither of us really paying attention. I stretched out along the cushion's legs, sprawled comfortably, and he dropped down beside me close enough that our shoulders brushed. I didn't move. Neither did he. The space between us felt charged. Heavy with something unspoken, his thigh pressed against mine, and he didn't shift away. Instead, he let it stay there warm, solid, a silent challenge. I didn't know how to answer at one point. I shifted to grab the remote from the coffee table, and when I leaned back, our bodies collided. It wasn't much a tangle of limbs and awkward bump, but it left me sprawled half across him, my chest brushing against his side, my face dangerously close to the hollow of his throat, where his pulse beat fast and steady. I froze. So did he. The movie continued to play, the blue light flickering across the walls, but neither of us moved. I could feel his heart hammering against my arm. Or maybe it was mine pounding so loudly that it echoed between us. His breath hitched just once, and then he shifted just enough to let me slide off him, without making it look like a retreat. Yet neither of us said anything. I pretended to focus on the movie after that, but I couldn't have told you a single thing about it. All I could think about was the way his body had felt under mine too. Warm, too strong, too familiar, and yet so entirely foreign I could still feel the ghost of his touch where our skin had met. Could still smell the faint scent of soap and skin that clung to him. I hated myself for noticing, for wanting to notice. The next day didn't make it easier. We kept finding excuses to touch, brushing past each other in the hallway, wrestling half-heartedly in the kitchen over the last slice of pizza, standing too close when there was plenty of room to spread out. It wasn't just the touches, though. It was the way he looked at me. Not like a brother should. His gaze was too heavy, too intent, as if he was trying to memorize the slope of my jaw, The line of my throat, the way my mouth twisted when I tried not to smile, and worse, I found myself looking back. At first, I caught myself and forced my eyes away, cheeks burning with shame, but it kept happening in stolen glances and long, slow looks that stretched just a second too long to be innocent. Every time I met his gaze, it felt like something inside me tilted dangerously, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. I hadn't meant to climb. I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in my mind, every accidental brush of skin, every lingering look, every half smile that felt like a secret. My body ached with the confusion of it. The wanting and the fear twisted so tightly together that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I wasn't supposed to feel like this, not about him. Not ever, but pretending it wasn't happening. Wasn't working anymore by the fourth night after another too long re. That way for long, he started throwing harder. Pushing me back with each catch, I dug my heels into the grass, grinning despite myself as I fought to match him. But when I threw the ball back with all my strength, he caught it one-handed show-off and charged. I barely had time to brace before he tackled me to the ground, the breath whooshing out of my lungs in a sharp gasp. We hit the grass hard, tangled together, his weight pinning me down. He laughed, the sound rough and breathless in my ear, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The world tilted his body, pressed along mine, all heat and hard muscle. Too much contact, too deliberate to brush off as accidental. His hands found my wrists again, pinning them against the ground like he had before. But this time, there was no easy laughter to hide behind. His face hovered above mine close enough that I could see the tiny scar on his chin, the one he'd gotten falling off his bike when we were kids. Close enough to feel the warm rush of his breath against my cheek. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And for one horrifying, electrifying second, I didn't want to. He must have seen it, the panic, the confusion, because he pulled away suddenly, rolling off me and onto his back with a groan. "Getting slow, little bro," he said, voice tight, almost strained. I forced a laugh, sitting up quickly and brushing dirt off my jeans. My skin burned where he'd touched me, and no amount of scrubbing would erase the imprint of him. From my memory, the sky rumbled low in the distance, a deep warning growl that vibrated through the ground. A storm was coming. I welcomed the distraction. We headed inside as the first fat drops of rain started to fall. Dotting the porch with dark circles, thunder cracked overhead, and the house seemed to close in tighter around us. The walls pressing closer, the air thick with the smell of rain. And something else, something sharp and unspoken inside. We tried to pretend everything was normal. We raided the fridge for leftovers, argued over what movie to put on, wrestled over the remote like we were kids again. But every touch, every glance, every breath seemed loaded now, buzzing with an energy I didn't know how to name. When he grabbed my wrist during one of our playful scuffles, his fingers tightened just a fraction too long. When he pinned me to the couch, laughing breathlessly, his hips pressed into mine in a way that made my heart stutter, and my body betray me, I shoved him off harder than necessary, heart hammering against my ribs. "Chill, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to keep from shaking apart. He laughed it off, sprawling across the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. But his eyes followed me as I stood, as I mumbled some excuse about needing to check something upstairs. I didn't look back as I fled to my room, slamming the door harder than I intended. My chest ached, a hollow, bruised feeling blooming there. I paced the small space, running my hands through my hair, trying to make sense of the chaos inside me. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. He was my brother, and yet I squeezed my eyes shut. Dragging in a ragged breath, I had to get a grip. I had to stop letting my stupid, traitorous body feel things it wasn't supposed to feel. Nothing was going to happen. Nothing had happened. It was just roughhousing, just nerves. Just the weird awkwardness of coming home after so long. I threw myself onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow, willing to sleep. To come and wash everything away for a while, the storm outside was the only sound. Rain lashing against the windows, thunder rolling in lazy, dangerous waves across the sky. I focused on it, clinging to it like a lifeline, letting it drown out the thoughts circling my mind like vultures. I must have drifted close to sleep. caught in that hazy, weightless place where dreams start to bleed into reality. That's when I heard it soft, almost hesitant, the creak of a floorboard in the hallway. My heart lurched, and I sat up slowly, every nerve ending snapping awake. I stared at the door wide eyed, barely breathing another step closer this time, the soft pad of bare feet against old wood. He was out there standing just beyond the thin strip of light at the bottom of the door. I didn't know what I wanted more: for him to knock, to come in, to say something that would make sense of this terrible, beautiful confusion, or for him to walk away before everything broke past the point of no return. I clutched the blanket tighter, heart slamming against my ribs' throat, dry as dust. The footsteps paused right outside my door, and then the knob turned just slightly, as if testing whether it would open. I squeezed my eyes shut, every muscle in my body locked tight, waiting. And that was the beginning. The knob turned again, slower this time, deliberate and sure, and my heart stuttered in my chest. I stayed frozen beneath the blanket, half sitting, half curled, staring at the door as if doing so could somehow keep it closed. The floor beneath me seemed to tilt slightly, the air thick and syrupy sticking in my throat as, through him, like a broken bone, tearing through skin shock. Tore through me, first sharp, cold, disorienting. I couldn't process it fast enough, couldn't find the right file in my brain to shove it into this. Didn't happen. Brothers didn't say these things. Brothers didn't feel these things. But underneath the shock, rising fast and hot and terrible, was something else: relief. As horrible as it was, a part of me felt the tight coil inside my chest loosen, as if some invisible weight I'd been carrying my whole life had suddenly been named and lifted. I hated that part of myself, hated it so much, I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. But it was there, I couldn't deny it. He inched closer, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. His hand lifted halfway, trembling in the thick, charged air between us. For a terrifying, dizzying moment, I thought he was going to touch me. I thought he was going to close the last few inches of space and destroy whatever fragile boundary still stood between us, and God help me. I wanted him to. His fingers hovered inches from my cheek, close enough that the heat of him brushed against my skin, like a whisper, close enough that I could almost imagine the calluses on his fingertips, the roughness, the softness, the way it would feel if he let himself touch me. The way he clearly wanted to, but at the last second he stopped. His hand trembled there for a long, breathless heartbeat, then curled into a tight fist and dropped uselessly back to his lap. He bowed his head, pressing the heel of his palm against his forehead like he could physically scrub the shame out of himself. His body shuddered, every line of him pulled tight with guilt and wanting and fear. "I'm sorry," he rasped. Barely louder than the rain rattling against the window panes, I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't know what I would have said, even if I could speak. The words weren't big enough, weren't brave enough to fill the aching space between us. We stayed there, locked in that unbearable silence. He still trembling on his knees, fists pressed against his thighs like he could hold himself together if he just tried hard enough. Me frozen heart tattooing painfully in my chest, torn between running and reaching out. The storm outside rumbled low and steady. Filling the room with its mournful voice, the rain hammered the windows, a relentless sound that matched the frantic, chaotic rhythm of my pulse. Still, neither of us moved. Still, neither of us dared to close the final shattering distance. The air between us buzzed alive with every word we couldn't say, every feeling we couldn't name, every breath we stole from the wreckage we were about to leave behind. And somehow in that terrible suspended moment, I knew we were already too far gone. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My body felt trapped between the instinct to run and the overwhelming, aching need to stay. And still, he reached out slowly. Hesitantly, his fingertips brushed against my cheek so lightly I might have imagined it. If not for the way my skin burned beneath the touch, I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned into his hand, a soft, broken sound catching in my throat. His breath hitched, his eyes searching mine, desperately, pleadingly, like he was waiting for me to shove him away to end this before it really began. But I didn't. I reached for him, clumsy, shaking, fisting the fabric of his t-shirt at the collar, Dragging him closer with all the strength I had left, he crashed into me with a gasp. Our mouths colliding in a kiss so fierce, so desperate, it knocked the last shreds of sanity from my mind. His hands framed my face, rough and trembling, pulling me deeper into him like he couldn't get close enough, couldn't breathe without me. The kiss was messy, frantic, fueled by months, maybe years of buried longing. Neither of us had dared admit it wasn't gentle, it wasn't soft, it was raw and hungry. The kind of kiss that bruised and burned and branded. I kissed him back with everything I had, clutching at him like he was the only thing holding me together. His mouth was hot against mine, his hands wandering, sliding into my hair down my spine over my ribs like he needed to memorize every inch of me before we both came to our senses. He pushed me gently back against the mattress, following me down without breaking the kiss. His body pressing into mine with a knee that was almost painful. Our legs tangled clumsily, our breathing ragged and uneven. The bed creaking softly beneath us until we did the deed when we finally pulled apart. It wasn't because we wanted to. It was because we had to. Because breathing had become a battle we were both losing. He stayed close, his forehead resting against mine, our noses brushing our breaths. Mingling in the charged air between us, his fingers threaded through mine without hesitation, grounding us both to the reality we had just created, a reality neither of us could run from now. I felt his heartbeat hammering wildly under my palm where I pressed it against his chest. Felt the way he trembled with the force of everything he could